The galaxy had always been a dangerous place, but the Deathworld Alliance prided itself on being the strongest defense for the human colonies and their allies. They were not just soldiers. They were survivors of some of the deadliest regions in space, trained to handle situations that no one else could. The Alliance had been formed decades earlier after a series of devastating wars that had left entire star systems in ruins. The leaders of the Alliance knew that the galaxy was not a safe place for ordinary beings, so they focused on creating a force capable of facing threats that no one else dared to confront. They recruited from the most daring pilots, the smartest strategists, and even mercenaries who had reputations for surviving impossible odds. Every member, human or alien, had to prove themselves in brutal training simulations that pushed them to their absolute limits. The Alliance was not just a military organization, it was a symbol of hope for those living in the outer colonies, where life was cheap and danger was constant. Captain Arlen Voss was one of the most respected commanders in the Alliance. He had risen through the ranks not just because of his skill with ships and weapons, but because of his ability to stay calm in situations where others would panic. Stories about him were whispered in the corridors of Alliance command centers and among the crews of distant colonies. He had once led a rescue mission through a region of space where gravitational anomalies would tear ships apart if navigated incorrectly. Many thought the mission was impossible, but Voss succeeded, saving hundreds of lives. His reputation was not built on luck but on his sharp mind, careful planning, and his refusal to give up even when the odds were hopeless. People admired him because he treated his crew like family, and he always believed that no mission was too dangerous if it could protect innocent lives. The morning that changed everything began like any other. For the Alliance Command Center, monitors flickered with routine updates. The hum of engines and communication signals filled the room, and officers went about their usual duties. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered by an emergency alert. A red light blinked on the main console, and an urgent message appeared on every screen in the command room. It was a distress signal from the Andros sector, a region known for its rich trade routes but also notorious for pirate activity and unpredictable cosmic storms. The signal was brief and alarming. An entire convoy had been destroyed, and no survivors were reported. But what shocked the command center even more was the description of the attacker, a ship of unknown origin, one that had never been recorded before in Alliance logs. This was no ordinary pirate vessel. It was massive, heavily armored, and equipped with weapons capable of wiping out fleets without breaking a sweat. Reports described it as moving faster than any known ship, attacking with precision, and leaving nothing behind except debris and destruction. The Alliance officers exchanged worried glances. They had dealt with dangerous ships before, but this was something entirely new, something that could threaten the very existence of human colonies if left unchecked. Voss was called to the command center immediately. As he entered, the room seemed to tense, everyone knowing that his decisions now could mean life or death for thousands. He quickly studied the reports, listening to the details from communications officers who had intercepted the remnants of the distress signal. The more he learned, the more serious the situation became. The ship, which had already been nicknamed the Oblivion by the panicked survivors, appeared almost invincible. Its shields absorbed entire missile volleys without a scratch, and its weapons could destroy multiple ships in seconds. Intelligence suggested that the ship had advanced technology far beyond anything the Alliance had seen, possibly even surpassing the most sophisticated warships in their fleet. Voss knew that a direct attack with conventional tactics would be suicide. This was not a mission for ordinary soldiers. This was a battle that would test every ounce of strategy, courage, and innovation that the Alliance had ever relied upon. Despite the fear gripping the command center, Voss remained calm. He had faced impossible situations before, and while the Oblivion was unlike anything he had ever encountered, he refused to allow panic to spread. He called a meeting with his top officers, a mix of humans and aliens who had earned their places through years of proven skill. They gathered around a holographic table that projected a three-dimensional map of the Andros sector. Voss traced the paths of the destroyed convoy, analyzing the angles of attack and the timing of the ship's strikes. Every detail suggested that the Oblivion was not just a ship but a force of destruction with intelligence behind its movements. It was almost as if it could anticipate the Alliance's actions before they were taken. The officers exchanged anxious looks, realizing that they were about to face a threat. They could not only destroy fleets but possibly challenge the very safety of the galaxy. Voss spoke with quiet authority, reminding everyone that fear could not dictate their actions. They had trained for situations like this. Even if they had never imagined something of this magnitude, their task was clear: find a way to stop the Oblivion before it struck again. As preparations began, the tension in the Alliance grew. Ships were readied, pilots briefed, and engineers worked tirelessly to upgrade weapons and shields. Every officer and soldier knew that the coming battle would not just test their skills but their survival instincts. Rumors spread among the crews about what kind of ship the Oblivion might be. Some thought it was a rogue human experiment gone wrong, while others speculated that it was a new type of alien warship. Nobody knew for sure, but everyone agreed that underestimating it would be a fatal mistake. The Alliance also reached out to their intelligence networks across the galaxy. seeking any clue about the ship's origin. But reports came back with little more than speculation and fear. The Oblivion was unlike anything catalogued in any database, making it an unpredictable and terrifying opponent. Voss realized that they were entering uncharted territory, and that the first engagement with the ship would be a trial by fire, where every decision could lead to victory or complete annihilation. The outer colonies were also aware of the looming threat. In distant human settlements, news of the destroyed convoy spread quickly, sparking panic and uncertainty. Families feared for the safety of their loved ones, and the once bustling trade routes became eerily quiet as transport ships were grounded. Merchants and civilians looked to the Deathworld Alliance as their only hope, trusting that these seasoned warriors would do what others could not. Voss knew that the eyes of the galaxy were upon them, and the pressure weighed heavily on him and his officers. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. Success meant saving countless lives and preserving the stability of multiple star systems. Failure, however, could mean the loss of entire colonies and a blow to the very foundation of human and allied civilizations in that sector of space. As the fleet prepared to depart for the Andros sector, Voss spent a moment reflecting on the responsibility he carried. He walked along the deck of his flagship, observing the crew bustling with activity. Pilots checked their weapons, engineers recalibrated systems, and soldiers ran through final drills. Despite the fear and uncertainty, there was a sense of determination in the air. They were not merely fighting a ship, they were defending the lives of countless beings who depended on them. Voss remembered the lessons he had learned over the years. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. Leadership was not about orders, but about inspiring others to rise to their best selves. And hope could be a weapon as powerful as any missile or laser. With these thoughts, he prepared to lead his fleet into what might be the most dangerous encounter of their lives. As the fleet left the safety of the Alliance's base, the vastness of space stretched before them, filled with both opportunity and peril. Stars glimmered like distant beacons, and the dark void reminded everyone that danger could appear at any moment. Every sensor was active, scanning for signs of the Oblivion, and every crew member knew that vigilance was crucial. Voss took his position on the bridge, eyes focused on the holographic displays, heart steady but mind alert. This was the beginning of a battle that would define the Deathworld Alliance's legacy. The first chapter of a story that would be told across the galaxy was about to unfold, a story of courage, strategy, and survival against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. And in that moment, amidst tension, fear, and anticipation, Voss understood that the coming days would test everything the Alliance stood for, and everything they believed about their ability to protect the galaxy. The fleet of the Deathworld Alliance moved steadily through the vast darkness of the Andros sector, every ship alert and ready for battle. The crews had been briefed, weapons checked, shields raised, and strategies discussed countless times. But as they approached the last known location of the Oblivion, an uneasy silence fell over the fleet. It was the kind of silence that made even seasoned soldiers uneasy, a quiet before chaos, a calm that hinted at the storm to come. Captain Arlen Voss stood on the bridge of his flagship, eyes fixed on the holographic projections of the sector. Every detail mattered: asteroid belts, space debris, and gravitational anomalies. Even a small mistake could mean disaster, and the Oblivion was known to exploit every weakness with ruthless precision. He could feel the tension among his officers, and he knew that the battle ahead would not be just a test of weapons, but of minds and courage. The first encounter happened almost immediately. Scouts sent ahead to locate the ship reported sudden energy fluctuations and bursts of radiation, signs that the Oblivion was nearby. Without warning, the massive vessel appeared, looming out of the darkness like a phantom. Its surface shimmered with shields that seemed unbreakable, reflecting every energy blast fired at it. The Alliance fleet unleashed their first volley, hundreds of missiles and laser strikes, hoping to overwhelm the unknown enemy. But the Oblivion absorbed everything effortlessly. Explosions that should have torn it apart instead fizzled out against its shield, leaving the ship unscathed and almost mocking in its perfection. Shock and disbelief rippled through the fleet. Many pilots had faced dangerous ships before, but nothing like this. The ship moved with terrifying speed and precision, calculating every maneuver and counterattack as if it could anticipate the thoughts of its opponents. The initial strikes by the Alliance were not just ineffective, they were dangerous. In moments, several ships were torn apart by the Oblivion's devastating weaponry. It fired beams of concentrated energy that carved through ships like they were made of paper. The fleet tried to regroup, but every tactic they attempted was countered flawlessly. The ship's targeting systems were astonishingly accurate, destroying even small escort ships that attempted to flank it. Communications were filled with frantic updates from pilots reporting the devastation. Some described it as a machine capable of reading the mind of the enemy, predicting every move before it happened. Fear began to spread, not only among the crews in the fleet, but also in the command center back at the Alliance headquarters. The Oblivion was proving to be more than a ship. It was an unstoppable force, a weapon designed for annihilation, and the Alliance had never faced anything even remotely like it. Captain Voss knew that conventional tactics would not succeed. He held an emergency meeting with his senior officers, gathering them around the holographic map of the sector. Every strategy they had rehearsed in simulations was failing in reality. Voss studied the Oblivion's movements carefully, trying to find patterns, weaknesses, anything that could give them a fighting chance. Every time they thought they understood it, the ship changed its approach, attacking from unexpected angles and using maneuvers that no human pilot would have considered. It was as if the ship had a mind of its own. Voss realized that brute force would not win this battle. They needed intelligence, creativity, and perhaps even luck. The challenge was more psychological than tactical. His officers looked at him, waiting for direction, and he gave them calm but firm instructions. They would need to coordinate every attack precisely, watch for patterns, and be prepared to adapt instantly. Survival depended on every person acting perfectly in sync. The battle raged for hours. Waves of missiles, laser beams, and plasma torpedoes collided with the Oblivion, but nothing made a dent in its shields. Ships that had faced pirates, warlords, and dangerous cosmic storms found themselves outmatched. The Oblivion tore through formations with precision, picking off capital ships one by one. Voss directed maneuvers with tense focus, trying to keep his fleet alive while also maintaining an offensive. Pilots risked everything to get close enough to strike, weaving through energy blasts and debris, but the Oblivion seemed to anticipate every move. The fleet was starting to fracture under the strain. Smaller squadrons had already been lost, and reports of casualties kept coming in. Morale was dropping fast. The Alliance had prepared for dangerous missions before, but nothing had prepared them for the horror of seeing a ship capable of destroying entire fleets with apparent ease amid the chaos. Rumors began to circulate of alien observers lurking near the edges of the battlefield. These mysterious ships had been seen moving silently, sometimes appearing in sensor scans for only brief moments before vanishing. No one knew their intentions. Were they scouts for another enemy, or neutral parties watching the carnage? The presence of the aliens added another layer of tension. Voss considered the possibility that they could be helpful allies, but without knowing their motives, trusting them would be dangerous. Still, desperate times left few options. The fleet had already taken heavy losses, and continuing conventional attacks without any new advantage could mean complete annihilation. Every officer knew that they were at the mercy of forces beyond their understanding, and every decision now carried the weight of life and death. Back on the bridge of the flagship, Voss monitored the situation as reports of destruction continued to flood in. One of the newer officers, a young pilot named Kale, reported seeing the Oblivion perform maneuvers that defied conventional physics: sudden shifts in trajectory, instantaneous dodges, and even what seemed like teleportation across short distances. Voss listened carefully, taking notes and relaying instructions to other pilots to maintain formation and avoid being isolated. He understood that panic would lead to mistakes, and mistakes would be fatal. Pilots began relying on instinct more than strategy, and every movement had to be precise. The battle was not only physical but mental. Fear and stress could easily lead to errors. Voss reminded himself constantly that leadership meant keeping others focused and calm, even when everything around them seemed hopeless. The intensity of the battle forced the fleet to innovate on the fly. Engineers began modifying weapons mid-combat, trying to find anything that could penetrate the Oblivion's shields. Pilots experimented with unconventional flight patterns, hoping that unpredictability could give them a slight advantage. Every member of the fleet was engaged in a desperate fight for survival, pushing themselves beyond the limits of training and endurance. Messages of bravery and heroism came from the front lines, a small squadron sacrificing themselves to distract the Oblivion so larger ships could escape. Engineers staying on deck to manually reroute power to failing systems. Medics working tirelessly to save wounded soldiers while under attack. The Alliance fleet had always been strong, but the presence of the Oblivion turned every individual effort into a battle against impossible odds. Their courage was tested like never before, and every decision could tip the balance between life and death. As the hours passed, it became clear that the Oblivion was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of terror. The fleet was forced to retreat temporarily to reassess, but even in withdrawal, the ship pursued with relentless efficiency. Reports of destroyed vessels and crew losses continued to pile up. Voss realized that conventional methods alone would not win this war. The Oblivion represented a new type of threat, one that required not just courage and firepower, but strategy, adaptability, and perhaps external help. The grim reality settled in. The Deathworld Alliance, for all its experience and strength, was facing an enemy that had already demonstrated it could overcome every tactic they had. The human and alien crews who had been so confident at the start were now forced to confront their own limitations, and fear mixed with determination in equal measure. The outcome of the battle was uncertain, and the weight of that uncertainty pressed heavily on every soul aboard the ships. The rising conflict also revealed the fragility of even the most organized fleets. Communications became clogged with panic-filled reports, supply lines were stretched thin, and coordination was constantly disrupted by the unpredictable movements of the Oblivion. Every squadron had to adapt quickly, improvising strategies and thinking creatively under immense pressure. Voss watched every action closely, adjusting commands in real time, trying to hold together a fleet that was being pushed to its absolute limits. The soldiers were brave, the pilots skilled, and the engineers ingenious, but the enemy was relentless. Even their best efforts seemed inadequate against a force that could anticipate, counter, and destroy with precision beyond their understanding. It became evident that this battle would define not only the lives of those involved, but the reputation and survival of the Deathworld Alliance itself by the end of the first day of engagement. The fleet had suffered devastating losses, but they were not yet defeated. The Oblivion had shown them the scope of its power, and the Alliance had learned painful lessons about their own vulnerabilities. Captain Voss gathered his remaining officers, emphasizing the importance of resilience and adaptation. They had to think differently, use ingenuity over brute force, and remain vigilant at all times. The rising conflict had demonstrated the stakes. They were up against a weapon designed for total annihilation, a foe that could adapt faster than they could anticipate. The battle was far from over, and the Alliance knew that the next move would require not only courage but also the willingness to consider unexpected alliances and unconventional tactics. The stage was set for the next phase, and every member of the fleet understood that survival depended on facing the unknown with clarity, courage, and unity. The Deathworld Alliance fleet had been battered and tested, and the Oblivion had already proven itself to be more than any of them had ever faced. After hours of relentless combat, heavy losses, and strategies that seemed to fail at every turn, the fleet was on the verge of collapse. Captain Arlen Voss knew that something had to change. Conventional tactics were clearly insufficient. The Oblivion's shields, weapons, and agility were beyond the limits of their technology, and every attack so far had only highlighted the futility of brute force. He called another emergency meeting with his senior officers to reassess the situation. The officers gathered, faces tense, fatigue and fear evident in their eyes. Voss reviewed every recorded maneuver of the Oblivion, every pattern of its attacks, and every failed strike of the Alliance. He realized that the only way to even stand a chance was to think differently, completely differently. It was during this intense planning session that reports began arriving from the edge of the sector. Alien ships, previously unnoticed, were appearing in the distance. Unlike the chaotic movements of the Oblivion, these ships moved with precision, scanning the battlefield without engaging at first. Their technology seemed advanced, unlike anything the Alliance had seen, with sleek hulls, unusual energy signatures, and weapons that could disable targets without direct destruction. Some of the officers were suspicious. Were these aliens enemies in disguise? Could they be scouting for another attack? Or worse, working for the Oblivion? Fear mixed with curiosity as the unknown fleet hovered in the periphery of the conflict. The possibility of Alizor new enemies presented both hope and danger. Voss realized that in this situation, hesitation could be fatal. Waiting too long to make contact could allow the Oblivion to destroy more of the Alliance fleet. Despite the uncertainty, Voss made a bold decision. He instructed his communications officer to attempt contact with the alien fleet. The message was simple but direct. The Alliance was engaged in a fight for survival and needed assistance. The aliens responded quickly, surprisingly without hostility. Their message was brief but clear. They were observing the Oblivion and were willing to assist under specific conditions. The exact motives of these aliens remained unknown, but the situation left little choice. Voss decided to trust them, at least temporarily. The potential to gain an advantage outweighed the risk of betrayal. Every officer knew that the coming collaboration would require absolute coordination, trust, and flexibility, things that were difficult even under normal circumstances, let alone in the middle of a battle against a nearly invincible ship. Preparations for joint maneuvers began immediately. The alien fleet provided intelligence on the Oblivion's shield systems, its energy patterns, and its weaknesses, information that the Alliance had been unable to uncover on their own. The crew worked tirelessly to adjust their strategies, reprogramming weapons systems, and synchronizing flight paths with the alien vessels. For the first time there was a glimmer of hope. The combined knowledge and technology gave the Alliance a fighting chance. Voss held frequent briefings with his officers, emphasizing that this was not just a battle of firepower, but a battle of coordination, trust, and adaptability. Every pilot, engineer, and soldier needed to be perfectly in sync. Mistakes could be fatal, but success was possible if they could work together. The first joint attack was carefully planned. Alliance squadrons and alien ships approached the Oblivion from multiple angles simultaneously. The aliens used their technology to disrupt the ship's shield patterns temporarily, creating small windows of opportunity for the Alliance ships to strike. For the first time, weapons fired by the Alliance had an effect, leaving minor damage on the Oblivion's outer armor. It was not enough to destroy the ship, but it was a breakthrough. Crew members cheered quietly, morale boosted by the realization that the seemingly unstoppable enemy could be wounded. Pilots adjusted to the new tactics, flying closer to the alien ships to maximize the benefits of the shield disruptions. Every maneuver was critical, and every attack had to be timed precisely. The fleet was no longer a collection of individual ships. It had become a coordinated force working with a single purpose. As the battle continued, the alien ships revealed additional abilities. They could generate temporary energy fields that interfered with the Oblivion's targeting systems, causing its weapons to misfire. They could also cloak portions of the fleet, making them temporarily invisible to the enemy's sensors. Voss observed these capabilities closely, realizing that these aliens had the kind of advanced technology that humans could not have invented on their own. While the presence of unknown allies introduced risk, their skills and intelligence were undeniably game-changing. The Alliance fleet adapted, using these advantages to maneuver closer attack more efficiently, and avoid some of the deadly strikes that had destroyed so many ships before. Despite the advantages, the Oblivion remained deadly. Every time the Alliance thought they were gaining ground, it countered with unexpected moves. Energy beams sliced through the void, explosions rocked smaller ships, and shields flared as weapons collided. The collaboration with the aliens was challenging. There were misunderstandings, miscalculations, and moments of panic. But over time, the fleets began to synchronize. The pilots learned the patterns and behaviors of the alien vessels, and the aliens adapted to the unpredictable maneuvers of human ships. Slowly, the combined fleet turned the tide from total desperation to cautious optimism. The Oblivion was no longer completely untouchable. For the first time, it showed signs of vulnerability. The psychological impact of the aliens' arrival was significant as well. The crews of the Alliance ships, who had been demoralized by hours of loss and destruction, now had hope. Soldiers and pilots who had been on the verge of panic found renewed focus and courage. The fear that had gripped the fleet transformed into determination. Voss made it a point to communicate directly with the crews, praising their bravery and emphasizing that survival was now within reach. He reminded them that the aliens' presence did not eliminate the danger, it merely provided an opportunity. They still faced a deadly opponent, but hope could fuel ingenuity and bravery in ways that pure fear could not. During one critical maneuver, a small squadron of Alliance fighters, guided by the aliens, managed to flank the Oblivion and strike at one of its auxiliary systems. The strike caused a temporary malfunction in the ship's weapons array, reducing its capacity to fire. For the first time, the Alliance fleet was able to attack with less immediate risk of counterattack. Engineers and pilots worked in perfect synchronization, using the window of opportunity to disable additional systems. The aliens provided tactical data in real time, predicting shield fluctuations and energy surges. Every move required precision, and every action had to be perfectly timed. The sense of teamwork between species, previously unknown and unprecedented, but it became the key factor in gradually turning the battle in their favor. As ours turned into a day-long engagement, the combined fleet began to gain momentum. Although the Oblivion remained powerful, its efficiency was being challenged. Every strike against it forced it to adapt, and each adaptation revealed new openings. The cooperation between humans and aliens demonstrated that even the deadliest enemy could be confronted if intelligence, skill, and trust were combined. Voss watched the battlefield, noting every small success, every damage inflicted, and every tactical advantage gained. The crews were exhausted, but adrenaline and determination kept them moving. They had transformed from a fleet fighting for survival into a force, capable of challenging one of the galaxy's most dangerous weapons. Despite progress, the battle was far from over. The Oblivion was resilient, and every maneuver required constant attention and coordination. Voss knew that the turning point had arrived, but the real test was still ahead. Could they maintain cohesion, trust, and precision under continued assault? Any mistake could undo all the progress made. Yet for the first time, the fleet felt something it had not experienced in hours. The presence of the aliens, their guidance, and the small victories against the Oblivion had transformed despair into possibility. It was a fragile hope easily shattered, but it was enough to fuel determination by the end of this phase. The Deathworld Alliance had survived the worst of the rising conflict, and the arrival of the aliens had turned the battle from a hopeless fight into a contest with a future. The fleet had learned that strength alone could not overcome the Oblivion, but collaboration, intelligence, and courage could. The turning point was not a single moment but a gradual realization. The enemy could be challenged, and survival depended not only on firepower but on trust, adaptation, and the willingness to accept help from unexpected sources. Captain Voss and his officers knew that the coming hours would be decisive, and the stage was set for a final, daring push against the seemingly invincible ship. The battle against the Oblivion had reached a level of intensity that none of the Deathworld Alliance crews had ever experienced before. Hours had passed, and each moment was a fight for survival. Ships were damaged, energy reserves were running low, and the tension on every bridge was almost unbearable. Captain Arlen Voss stood at the center of the flagship's bridge, his eyes scanning the holographic display of the battlefield. The Oblivion loomed like a shadow across the void, its shields shimmering, weapons primed, and movements precise. Despite all their preparation, the ship remained a terrifying opponent, a seemingly unstoppable force that could destroy entire fleets with ease. Yet now, with the alien allies providing intelligence and advanced technology, the Alliance had a plan that, if executed perfectly, could finally bring the Oblivion to its knees. The plan was audacious. It required precision timing, coordinated attacks, and unparalleled courage from every pilot, soldier, and engineer. The aliens had identified critical points in the Oblivion's system's weak spots that, if struck simultaneously, could disable its shields long enough for a concentrated assault. Voss knew that this would be the most dangerous maneuver any of his crews had ever attempted. It would involve flying directly into areas of extreme firepower, dodging energy beams, and striking at precise locations within the ship. One wrong move, one slight miscalculation, could destroy the fleet and end the lives of hundreds of brave soldiers. The risks were immense, but the opportunity to finally defeat this monster could not be ignored. Preparations began immediately. Fighters were grouped into squads with specific roles, larger capital ships were positioned to provide covering fire, and engineers recalibrated weapons to maximize impact. Every officer received detailed instructions, and every crew member knew that their actions would determine the outcome of the battle. Voss took a moment to address his crews over the comm system. His voice was calm but commanding, filled with a quiet intensity that inspired confidence. "We have faced impossible odds before," he said. "We have survived because we acted together, because we trusted each other, and because we refused to give up. This is no different. Focus, trust your training, and remember we fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone depending on us." His words resonated across the fleet, and for the first time in hours, a sense of unity replaced fear. The assault began with the alien ships, activating a field that interfered with the Oblivion sensors. The massive vessel's shields flickered briefly, and its weapons misfired in ways that had not been seen before. Voss seized the opportunity, directing the Alliance squadrons to advance. Pilots weaved through deadly beams of energy, narrowly avoiding explosions and debris. Each strike had to hit the target precisely, exploiting the brief moments when the shields weakened. Smaller ships darted in and out, drawing the Oblivion's fire and creating openings for larger vessels to strike at critical points in its hull. The choreography of destruction was complex, and any deviation could have catastrophic consequences. Yet despite the danger, the fleet moved with an almost perfect coordination, a testament to their training, courage, and adaptability. As the attack continued, the Oblivion retaliated with devastating force. Its energy beams lanced through the void, destroying smaller ships and heavily damaging capital vessels. Explosions rocked the fleet, sending shrapnel and debris into space. Pilots shouted over comms relaying updates on strikes and damage, while engineers worked frantically to maintain shields and repair critical systems. Some ships were lost entirely, blown apart in seconds, and every loss reminded the crews of the immense danger they faced. Yet even as fear pressed in, determination pushed them forward. The knowledge that this could be the final opportunity to strike at the enemy drove every soldier to act with focus and precision. The central maneuver involved a squadron lead, personally by Captain Voss. His flagship, heavily armored and bristling with weapons, would penetrate deep into the Oblivion's core, where the ship's main energy systems were located. The journey to the core was like navigating through a storm of death. Energy beams lashed from all sides, debris spun dangerously, and the void itself seemed alive with threats. Voss's hands were steady on the controls, his eyes scanning every display for changes in the Oblivion's movements. He guided his squadron through narrow corridors of destruction, dodging precise energy blasts and countering with coordinated attacks. Each moment was life or death, but his focus never wavered. Meanwhile, the alien allies provided critical support. They projected fields that disrupted the Oblivion's internal sensors, making it more difficult for the ship to target incoming attackers. They also fired energy pulses that weakened the internal systems just long enough for the Alliance to strike. Communication between human and alien crews became seamless, almost intuitive, as the pressure of combat forced instantaneous coordination. Pilots shouted instructions, engineers relayed updates, and every crew member moved as if connected by a single purpose. The synergy between the two fleets transformed what could have been a chaotic slaughter into a precise, deadly assault. At a critical moment, Voss's squadron reached the heart of the Oblivion. The interior was a maze of corridors, energy conduits, and defense systems. Beams of energy shot across the pathways, forcing ships to weave and twist with impossible agility. Explosions rocked the area, sending fragments of the ship flying. Engineers aboard Voss's flagship manually redirected power to shields and weapons, risking their lives to ensure the ship could withstand the onslaught. Pilots flew in formation with perfect timing, striking key points on the ship's inner hull. Every strike caused vibrations, sparks, and minor explosions. The crew's nerves were tested, but so was their courage. Each member understood the importance of their role. A single mistake could doom the entire mission. As the attack progressed, the Oblivion's defenses began to fail. Its shields flickered more frequently, energy weapons misfired, and internal systems malfunctioned. Voss could feel the tide turning, but he knew that the final moments would be the most dangerous. The ship, sensing its vulnerability, unleashed a concentrated barrage on the intruding fleet. Explosions tore through the void, and debris collided with the attackers. Pilots relied on split-second reactions, dodging with near-impossible precision. Engineers worked under extreme pressure, repairing damaged systems while maintaining weapons output. The battle had become a test of every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage the crews possessed. Finally, the coordinated attack reached its peak. The Alliance and alien fleets struck simultaneously at the critical points identified by the aliens. Explosions erupted across the Oblivion, tearing through armor and disabling weapons. Energy conduits overloaded, sending pulses of destructive energy rippling through the ship. For the first time, the Oblivion could not recover instantly. Its movements slowed, and its firepower decreased dramatically. Pilots pressed the advantage, attacking relentlessly while the aliens continued to disrupt its systems. The combined fleet had achieved the impossible. They had brought the seemingly unstoppable ship to its knees. In the climactic moments, Captain Voss directed a final strike aimed at the core of the Oblivion. Every remaining ship in his squadron focused on the same target, firing missiles, lasers, and energy pulses in a perfectly timed sequence. The ship shuddered violently, its shields failing completely, systems exploding, and hull tearing apart. Sparks and fire filled the void as the Oblivion's destruction became inevitable. Pilots maneuvered carefully to avoid debris. Engineers monitored for last-second system failures, and soldiers braced themselves for the impact. Finally, with a massive explosion that lit up the surrounding space, the Oblivion was destroyed. The fleet had survived, and the threat that had terrorized the Andros sector was eliminated. As the dust settled, the survivors of the Alliance and alien fleets took stock of the battlefield. Wreckage floated in the void, some ships barely operational, others completely destroyed. The cost had been high, hundreds of lives lost, countless ships damaged, but the victory was decisive. The Oblivion, which had seemed invincible and unstoppable, was no more. Captain Voss allowed himself a moment to breathe, proud of the bravery and skill displayed by every member of the fleet. The collaboration between human and alien crews had proven decisive, demonstrating that even the deadliest enemy could be overcome when forces worked together with courage, intelligence, and unity. The climax of the battle would be remembered for generations. It was not just a story of destruction and survival, but a lesson in trust, teamwork, and the power of strategic thinking under extreme pressure. The Deathworld Alliance had faced its greatest challenge and emerged victorious, having turned desperation into triumph. The story of the battle, the daring maneuvers, the coordination between species, and the bravery of every soldier and pilot would become legendary across the galaxy. The battle was finally over. The Oblivion, once a symbol of unstoppable power and fear, had been destroyed. The void of space around the Andros sector was quiet for the first time in what felt like an eternity. For the surviving crews of the Deathworld Alliance and their alien allies, the silence was both a relief and a stark reminder of what they had endured. Wreckage floated across the empty darkness, twisted metal from ships that had fought bravely, debris from weapons, and remnants of lives lost in the struggle. Every survivor understood the cost of the victory. Hundreds had died, and countless others had been wounded. Yet, despite the losses, a sense of triumph and hope filled the hearts of those who had lived to see the battle's end. Captain Arlen Voss walked the bridge of his flagship, gazing at the shattered battlefield. His mind was full of emotions, pride for the bravery of his crews, sorrow for those who had fallen, relief that the galaxy had been spared another threat. Voss took time to reflect on the nature of the conflict. The Oblivion had been unlike any enemy the Alliance had faced. It had not simply been a powerful ship. It had been a challenge to everything the Deathworld Alliance stood for: strategy, courage, and unity. Yet, in its destruction, the crews had discovered something just as important: the value of trust and collaboration. The alien fleet, whose motives had been uncertain at first, had become a crucial ally. Their advanced technology, tactical intelligence, and willingness to cooperate had turned the tide when all seemed lost. Voss understood that this was a lesson not only in combat but in the broader context of survival. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, and sometimes survival required putting aside fear and suspicion to embrace unexpected alliances. The surviving ships began the process of regrouping and assessing the damage. Pilots who had flown through lethal energy beams and dodged almost impossible attacks were exhausted but proud. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged systems, often under extreme pressure, knowing that any failure could jeopardize the safety of the fleet. Medical teams attended to the wounded, stabilizing injuries that ranged from minor burns to severe trauma from explosions. Every member of the fleet understood that the battle was over, but the aftermath required as much skill, attention, and courage as the fight itself. The human and alien crews moved together, a symbol of cooperation that had grown out of necessity but now held the promise of future partnerships. Messages of congratulations and relief flowed through the fleet. Command centers across the galaxy received word that the Oblivion had been destroyed, and disbelief mixed with gratitude in equal measure. Colonies that had feared annihilation were now able to breathe easier, knowing that the Deathworld Alliance had once again protected them from a seemingly insurmountable threat. Reports from other fleets praised the courage, ingenuity, and skill demonstrated during the battle. For Captain Voss and his officers, these words were meaningful. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that countless lives had been saved. Every pilot, soldier, and engineer who had fought and survived played a role in the victory, and that shared effort created a bond that would endure long after the battle. In the days that followed, the Deathworld Alliance worked closely with the alien fleet to salvage usable technology from the battlefield. Components from both destroyed ships and remnants of the Oblivion were carefully studied. Scientists and engineers were eager to learn from what had once seemed an unbeatable ship. The discoveries promised to improve shields, weapons, and strategic systems for future conflicts. Yet the process was also deeply emotional. Among the salvaged wreckage were reminders of lives lost, heroic actions, and sacrifices made. Each piece told a story, and the crews treated it with respect, honoring those who had given everything to ensure victory. It was a combination of grief and hope, mourning and progress, that characterized the recovery period. Captain Voss took the time to personally visit the surviving crews, offering words of encouragement and reflection. He met with young pilots who had survived their first major battle, guiding them through their experiences, helping them process both fear and pride. He spoke with engineers and medics, acknowledging their relentless work under extreme conditions. Voss emphasized that the victory had been possible because of every person's contribution, no matter how small or large. He reminded them that courage was not measured by the absence of fear, but by the willingness to act in spite of it. His leadership inspired the fleet to remain united, resilient, and ready for whatever threats might emerge next in the galaxy. The alien allies, too, had begun to forge stronger relationships with the Alliance. What had started as a tentative cooperation out of necessity evolved into mutual respect. Meetings were held to discuss tactics, technology sharing, and joint patrol strategies. Cultural exchanges occurred in small ways, stories shared in mess halls, shared meals in docking areas, and training exercises designed to build trust and familiarity. Both fleets had learned that strength alone was not enough to survive in the galaxy. It was collaboration, communication, and the ability to combine unique strengths that allowed them to overcome the deadliest challenges. The victory over the Oblivion became a symbol of what could be accomplished when different species, with different experiences and capabilities, worked together toward a common goal. Despite the relief and celebration, there was also a sense of reflection. Leaders of the Alliance considered the broader implications of the battle. The galaxy was filled with dangers, and if a ship like the Oblivion could appear, it was likely that other threats awaited. The strategies were reviewed, new protocols were implemented, and training for future encounters intensified. The Alliance recognized that victory had been hard-won not only because of courage, but because of preparation, adaptability, and the willingness to accept help when needed. Lessons from the battle were recorded, shared, and studied. Each officer, each pilot, and each engineer understood that the fight against the Oblivion was not the end of their responsibilities but a crucial step in preparing for what lay ahead. The human colonies that had been threatened by the Oblivion began rebuilding. Ships that had been lost were replaced over time, trade routes reopened, and survivors returned to their lives. Yet the memory of the battle lingered in every conversation, in every commemorative plaque, and in the stories told to children. It was a story of bravery, sacrifice, and resilience, a reminder that even in the face of the deadliest enemy, courage, intelligence, and unity could prevail. Communities celebrated the heroes who had risked everything, honoring those who had fallen and those who had survived. The story of the battle spread across the galaxy, inspiring countless others who would face dangers of their own in the future. Captain Voss reflected on the journey from fear to triumph. The Oblivion had tested every limit of the Deathworld Alliance, pushing crews to exhaustion, fear, and desperation. But it had also revealed the best in them, the courage to face the impossible, the intelligence to adapt under pressure, and the ability to trust others even in moments of uncertainty. The alien fleet had played a decisive role, teaching the humans valuable lessons about collaboration, technology, and strategy. Voss knew that the galaxy would always hold dangers, but the battle had proven that the Alliance, when united and resourceful, could face even the deadliest threats and survive in the quiet aftermath. The surviving crews took time to honor the fallen. Memorials were held on the flagship and on recovered colonies, with names of those who had given their lives inscribed in silver and gold. Stories of bravery were recounted, from pilots who had risked their lives to shield others from fire, to engineers who had repaired critical systems under impossible conditions. Even in grief, there was pride. The sacrifices had been meaningful. The lives lost had ensured the survival of countless others. Families of the fallen received word of their heroism, and across the galaxy, the narrative of bravery and resilience spread, reinforcing the values that the Deathworld Alliance stood for. As the fleet regrouped and prepared to return to normal patrols, Captain Voss looked to the future. The galaxy had been saved from the immediate threat, but he knew that vigilance was necessary. The victory over the Oblivion was a reminder of both the dangers that existed and the extraordinary potential of cooperation and courage. He understood that the true legacy of the battle would not be measured in destroyed ships or casualties alone, but in the lessons learned, the alliances forged, and the inspiration left behind. For those who would face challenges in the years to come, the story of the Oblivion became a legend. Across colonies, fleets, and distant planets, the tale of the Deathworld Alliance's courage spread. It was not just a story of destruction and survival, but a story of hope, unity, and the power of intelligence and collaboration. Children listened wide-eyed as elders recounted the bravery of pilots who flew into death without hesitation, engineers who held ships together under fire, and the alien allies whose timely support turned despair into victory. For the galaxy, the battle had become a symbol. Even the deadliest forces could be defeated when courage, strategy, and trust came together. In the end, the Deathworld Alliance returned to its patrols, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. The memory of the Oblivion remained, but so did the pride of survival, the bonds forged in battle, and the lessons learned. Captain Voss and his crews had faced the unimaginable and emerged victorious, leaving a legacy that would inspire generations. The galaxy, for now, was safer, but the story of the battle served as a reminder that vigilance, courage, and collaboration were the keys to surviving whatever challenges lay ahead. The triumph was not just a victory of weapons, but a victory of spirit, a testament to the power of determination, unity, and hope.